Two, one, and we are recording. And because we get the boot for talking about COVID today, we're clearly talking about climate change. And Dr. Tenenbaum he's only got about an hour left before the tide swallows him whole and he's killed. And so this will be his parting video to the world. And but on a more serious note, I don't know if I told you, I got permabanned from YouTube.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm very proud of
Do
it.
that with honor.
I do. And where are my manners? Please introduce yourself for all the new listeners.
Well, I'm Howard Tenenbaum. I'm a periodontist with PhD in cell biology. So I deal with oral inflammatory disease and other inflammatory disease and do a lot of research in the area of inflammatory disease. I'm a full professor at the University of Toronto at the Faculty of Dentistry, and also a full professor within the Department of Laboratory Medicine and Pathophysiology in the Faculty of Medicine at University of Toronto. And so I have lots of grad students. We do lots of research, and I'm doing a lot of collaborative work with several hundred other scientists who kind of think along the lines I do. We've published already 2 papers in this area, and many sort of editorials or op-eds regarding this area of climate change that you referred to. And because of the fact that we're also working on developing different therapeutics that are basically very inexpensive and easy to use and work, I've obviously had to familiarize myself deeply with the literature surrounding this issue. So I don't just rely on going to the CDC front webpage to get the latest disinformation, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Nor do I go to the FDA. And I'm from Canada, and I find that the same sorts of highly erroneous and not scientifically based recommendations are made on the websites of Health Canada and similar. So I am heavily involved in this whole issue, ranging from writing editorials, op-eds, which are evidence-based, and also even writing peer review articles that relate to this overall issue.
And for everybody listening, the last time Dr. Tenenbaum, excuse me, was on here, we kind of joked around and shot the shit and talked about how Pfizer mercenaries were eventually going to kill me. And but we didn't really get into your work and your research on this. And I think we both agreed we would aim to do that more with this episode. And just so you know, so the thing I got banned for was I had on Dr. Peter McCullough twice. And the second time he recommended everyone take 4 vitamins. There are these 4 vitamins: quercetin, turmeric, vitamin D, and zinc.
Right.
Just thing. He's like, it wasn't even like, don't take the vaccine, wasn't, I don't think we even talked about ivermectin.
Just to sort of prime your
Yeah.
immune system so it's optimal.
Yeah.
That's all.
And I forgot to put the links in the video. And I was like, he made such a point of saying these. I was like, I don't want to just kind of back end them and, go in later and link them in. So one morning before the gym, I mean, literally like no shirt, like just woke up and was like, oh, I meant to post this yesterday. Here are these 4 vitamins, Dr. McCullough, blah, 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 said to say, uploaded it. You have been banned for medical misinformation, and due to repeated strikes making YouTube, quote, an unsafe place, we have removed your channel from YouTube. All right, is what it is. But that's what I got removed for. And with yesterday, I think it was Joe Rogan put up a video and was like, 3 days ago I found out I had COVID. He was like, we threw everything at it. He's like, including ivermectin. And it's like 3 days later, he's like, and now I feel great. It's like, I feel absolutely great. So it seems that there's sort of, because before when I would talk about the vaccine, people would say, you're not a doctor. And then I'd have on Dr. Malone and it'd be like, that doesn't count. And I'd be like, how does it not count? It seems like but when I told all my friends I got banned for this, the name of the video is literally take your vitamins, like all lowercase, like was running out to the gym, just take your vitamins. And that kind of got a lot of people scratching their head who normally were kind of against what I was doing. You're an anti-vaxxer. No, I'm not. So in sort of the spirit of continually chipping away at the dam, what is the most important aspects of your research or what you have found uh, that we should cover today in direct opposition to, as you said, sort of the ministries of truth saying, take the vaccine, make sure you shoot it into your baby, wear 11 masks.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Joe Rogan. I think it's a phenomenal story because the clinical course of his disease is exactly what we see all the time when individuals are treated with this early multi-drug therapy that Dr. McCullough talks about, which includes ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, as well as other agents, including aspirin, because of the blood clotting issues. And it's very typical. And Regeneron is actually been shown, I think, to be highly effective, and it is EUA approved. I'm not sure if it's fully approved. It should be, but I don't know if it is. And so we're not talking about snake oil. We're talking about already approved medications that are highly safe and so on. But then when you see that the mainstream media talk about Joe Rogan's therapy, and when you read about what he did, it's actually absolutely standard according to what Dr. McCullough and other very highly intelligent and famous clinicians will talk about. They still somehow, somewhere in the headlines or halfway through the paper, they'll talk about it's horse medicine, taking horse medicine. So, which is, it's disingenuous at best. And think of it this way: if that's horse medicine, that we give cattle lots of antibiotics.
Yeah.
They're bred on antibiotics for various reasons, not just infection. So does that mean that when my doctor gives me amoxicillin, he's giving me cow medicine? I mean, that's the logic that they're using.
And what, canine aspirin?
Yeah, they're giving me bovine medicine, and my doctor should lose his license or her license. So that's the problem. And the statements they make, they do not back up. They're typically these sorts of things. It's horse medicine. And in fact, it wasn't invented as horse medicine, and it was invented for treatment of scabies and river blindness and very important diseases, given in billions of doses. And in fact, the inventor received the Nobel Prize in medicine. So that's some horse medicine.
Yeah.
So in terms of our research, it's sort of more than one type of research. On one level, we're working together, myself, Harvey Risch, Paul Alexander, Peter McCullough, Robert Malone, on literature review. In other words, going into the literature to look at the peer review published science in order to formulate our opinions. And so you write these systematic reviews or scoping reviews, and the data are very clear when you do this, and you can see that for example, ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine are highly effective. And what's also very important to realize is when we do these reviews, we see that there are studies that suggest that they're not effective. And typically the studies were badly done, either very small number or wrong age group, like people who are going to survive the disease anyway, or who are going to recover very quickly anyway. So why would you anticipate any impact of the drug? And, these are major issues. But what even more important is that when you look at COVID-19 as a disease, it's a staged disease. It's the underlying pathophysiology of the disease is quite complex, and we still don't understand all of it. But we know it's a staged disease. So there's a viral replication stage. There is sort of an inflammatory stage, viral clearance stage. And then a third stage where we start to see the famous cytokine storm become even more of an issue. So mid-stage, you might see the beginnings of the cytokine storm, also known as acute respiratory distress and sepsis. And these stages come with different ramifications. So the initial phase, of course, is viral. And if you can inhibit viral replication, you will help the patient, because if you don't do that, what happens is you get the immune system acting up, and if it does its job properly initially, you'll have lots of dead cells that were infected by the virus and lots of debris, which in and of themselves act to trigger an even more serious hyperinflammatory response later on. So merely slowing down the replication of the virus in and of itself is important, because you don't get it sick, period, in the initial phases. And typically it's the rapid recovery, like literally 24 hours. And you're not exposing the patient to this overload of viral debris and cellular dead cell debris, which triggers the acute respiratory distress syndrome. So antiviral therapy, such as provided by ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, has been shown also to be strongly antiviral, as has doxycycline, by the way, and I believe even azithromycin, although I'm not completely sure about that, but certainly doxycycline has been shown to definitely inhibit replication, growth of the virus in human cells, as has ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. So that's important. But then you get into a phase where not only are you infected, your cells are starting to make these spike proteins, well, actually virus particles, sorry. And the virus particles, of course, have the spike proteins on the outside. And the spike proteins interact with various other cells, and they bind to cells. They help the virus enter cells. But the spike protein in and of itself is toxic, and to the point where it can induce what we call thrombotic disease, where patients will, you'll see clumping of platelets, and this increases. It's a circulatory disease, really. It's which is interesting. So it's a cardiovascular disease, not just a respiratory disease. And these patients can start to develop clots, it's very true, as a result of this. So once again, you wouldn't just give them ivermectin, you might add some of the, like Lovenox, or maybe even just aspirin, 325 milligrams, to block the platelet and the clotting phase of the disease, which of course can lead to heart attacks, strokes, and things like this. And then in the third phase, when you're talking about, the more severe cytokine storm, well, the cytokine storm isn't just, what's a cytokine? Cytokine is kind of like a molecule or a hormone produced by cells that doesn't necessarily go throughout the body and affect another organ like the pancreas does when it produces insulin, which is a hormone. But the cytokines will activate locally and systemically in more inflammatory disease. But it's not just cytokines. What are also produced, and I think I've mentioned this before, are an array of destructive enzymes that can literally liquefy lung tissue. I mean, these enzymes can break down bone tissue.
Jesus.
And other very dense connective tissue. So if they can do that, and we know that for a fact, then of course that upregulation of those nasty molecules that's what leads to the severe disease of the respiratory system as well, and the inability to breathe and so on. So if you consider treatment with the medications like colchicine, which was studied in Canada, a beautiful study done by the Montreal Heart Institute, where they showed colchicine did have benefit, or even doxycycline. As a matter of fact, doxycycline is a very profound inhibitor of these destructive enzymes. And by the way, azithromycin is, hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin also may have effects, but ivermectin not so much on those enzymes. It doesn't seem, we've done some actual research showing it doesn't really do much to the enzymes, but boy, doxycycline does, and a combination of some other drugs that we're working on. And so what you do at that point of the disease, and colchicine also being important as an anti-inflammatory, is that you're knocking down the inflammatory, the severe life-threatening inflammatory component of the disease. And don't forget, I mean, it is inflammation. So even if you're not blocking these destructive enzymes directly, things like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine have been used off-label, my God, off-label for management of rheumatoid arthritis and other autoimmune inflammatory diseases, and they're used as anti-inflammatories to manage these diseases. And they've been doing this for, the last 30 years, or at least I think for hydroxychloroquine, and for ivermectin maybe less, but still billions of doses. And it's highly safe and effective for management of those inflammatory disease, which then leads you to question why the FDA and CDC are saying that the same drug, the horse drug, is so dangerous in humans, when it's only dangerous in humans if they happen to have COVID, which doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Dollar bills.
It just doesn't wash. I mean, the logic just isn't there. And so, so we're actually doing some laboratory work. We're doing literature review work, and even things like going to the CDC and then looking at some of their recommendations. For example, masking. Suddenly masking is important again, whether you've had a vaccine or not. In fact, it seems even more important if you've had a vaccine for various reasons. And they'll say that this is based on literature, this paper, this paper, this paper. Well, if you then look at the papers that they use to legitimate their recommendation for mask use, if I recall, one of the papers that they use actually comes to a completely different conclusion, which is that actually mask use doesn't work. Another paper, it's one of my faves, is of two hairdressers who wore masks and face shields, and I think both had COVID, eventually it turned out, and none of their clients got COVID. Now, okay, listen, anecdotal or case report, I'm not averse to real world data in any way. And I look at that and go, oh, okay, but it doesn't stand to the high bar that Dr. Fauci sets for randomized controlled trials, does it? On the other hand, you then read that they've referenced an article that came out of Denmark, well done prospective study. By the way, there was another study that just came out on school teachers and masking, showing that if anything, the masked school teachers trended, not a statistically significant trend, but nevertheless, if they'd done a larger study, they might have seen statistical significance, but trended towards having more colds, more incidents of COVID, probably because when they were talking to their adult colleagues, they had to yell so they could be understood. Because the masks are very questionable in terms of effectiveness. And so I refer, let's say, to this study that came out of Denmark. And the CDC does quote the study, which is surprising. However, they say, but it's really too small of a study to make any definitive conclusions. There were 2,000 participants in the study. 1,000 were masked, 1,000 were not masked, and the outcome of the study showed that masking had no protective effects with regard to transmission of COVID or in this population of patients who were studied. So that's 1,000 in each group. 3 hairdressers or 2 hairdressers, that's enough for the CDC relying on a paper that actually doesn't support their contention is enough for the CDC, but relying on a study which involved 2,000 people, that was too small. So, I mean, and it was prospective too, and randomized, so as to who got the masks and who didn't. So, I mean, you can't really do a placebo because, well, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, they know they're not masked usually, but it's still a randomized controlled trial and prospective, and you really can't get much better than that, and they just ignore it, along with, by the way, pre-existing literature, but on influenza that show the exact same thing. And then, of course, there's a study done on Marine recruits. Now, you can just imagine a Marine recruit, they know they have to follow whatever rules the Master Sergeant gives them. And so this cohort, and it was a fairly large number. I wish I actually forget their N, the number, but they were quarantined. So this is all non-pharmaceutical interventions, NPIs they call them. And they were quarantined for 2 weeks before they went for their, I guess, basic training. They were in quarantine. Then they landed up on Paris Island, which is, I guess, where one of the Marine training bases is. And they were then re-quarantined. They were also tested for COVID. Interestingly, not interestingly, I mean, the results were that none of them at intake had tested positive for COVID, regardless of your position on the test. But at the very least, given that it has such a strong tendency towards false positives, the fact that they tested negative, to me is a very, very profound indicator that, in fact, they weren't infected, at least at that point. They were masked. They were socially distanced. And again, don't forget, these are Marine recruits who will listen to everything that their Master Sergeant tells them to do. They, even when they used the washroom facilities, understanding that actually oral fecal transmission of the disease may be even more of an issue than aerosol or airborne transmission. So after the use of the washroom, each one of them would disinfect the washroom with bleach, which would kill any virus. Of course, how effective their disinfection was, I don't know, but it's still far better than not even doing that. And wouldn't you know it, but they start developing COVID. And a little ill, feeling a little ill, a little symptomatic. And they even found that the same platoon members who were more congregated but still socially distanced, when they sequenced the virus, they found that it was the exact same virus that they had been transmitting to each other, even though they were social distanced and wearing face masks, surgical face masks. So it kind of puts the lie to social distancing. It kind of puts the lie to the effectiveness of face masks. And as I said before, there are plenty of studies in the area of influenza that show the same thing, which is that the use of masking does not stop the spread of the disease. One final bit of evidence, which is remarkable, even I was surprised, and that is that there was a research article that focused on the use. I don't know if you'd actually be able to do that study now for ethics reasons, but nonetheless, they focused on the use of face masks by surgeons who were performing surgery, surgeons, nurses, anyone in the OR. And other groups didn't wear masks. And they were looking at infection rate in the wound, the surgical wound, because that's really why, obviously, why we wear masks when we do surgical procedures, is to prevent the patients from becoming infected. And they found, to my surprise, that there was no difference in wound infection rates between the masked versus the unmasked OR personnel, which is just astounding, right? So, I mean, if they don't work under that condition, then why would we anticipate that it would work in a pandemic, particularly when most of the people using the masks don't even know how to wear a mask. And they're also reusing the same mask over and over, which, as we know, after 30 minutes, they become ineffective. But what was the really interesting finding was that wound infection was far more correlated with whether or not the operators were chatting and speaking during surgery than those who were quiet. So it wasn't the mask that made any difference. It was whether they were chatting, talking, which kind of makes sense. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
like I said, I was surprised initially, but then when they wrote about the talking part in the paper, I thought, okay, yeah. But again, the masks under the conditions of surgery didn't prevent infection of the patient. And so these are data that come way before COVID. And as I've said before, what that means is that when Dr. Fauci, for example, said that the use of masking during a pandemic is unnecessary and ineffective and might even be damaging, he was right. And he was relying on the literature at that time. When he changed his mind, he used a sort of I guess, somewhat plausible explanation that, well, as a scientist, I have to follow new developments and there's new research, and that's why I've changed my opinion on masks, except for the fact that the new research that is available now doesn't support masking, and especially children. So now I don't know why the CDC and or NIH, FDA, Dr. Fauci are recommending masks, because the scientific data actually didn't change. They still support the notion that masking is ineffective in stopping a pandemic. And then considering the damage it does to children, and there's arguments about CO2 and oxygen, and I'm not going to get into that because I think it's actually not settled yet to my satisfaction. But certainly, if you talk about learning and cognitive development in children, they need to see whole faces. They need to see facial expressions. Autistic children are in terrible trouble. And I'll finish and then let you ask me some more. But one other thing that we all know about, at least all the teachers talk about, is something called the summer slide. I don't know if are you aware of what that is? The summer slide is a sort of a well-known phenomenon. I don't know if I haven't actually read any articles on it, but I just rely on some teacher friends to tell me about it. And that basically is represented in the following way. That is, children who learned up to a certain level in mathematics, when they get back to school after the summer break, they have to be retaught.
Oh yeah.
Right? And because of the summer slide, this information has been lost or stored somewhere where they're not accessing it. And that's the summer slide. So now add to that the fact that they've closed down schools. This is like the year-long slide, and they've unnecessarily closed down schools, as we know, and the masking issues with respect to cognitive and neuropsychological development. We're in for, I think, some really awful surprises in the next decade or so when these people grow up.
It's insane. I mean, yeah, think about when you're like sending texts versus on a phone call. Just, the entire I know, at least I do, you misinterpret and overthink every text. Someone responds with yes and a period, and you're like, oh shit, are they mad? In reality, they're running out the door and they, their phone auto finished it, and they're, it's whatever.
Yeah, and it's how does a child develop?
Sure.
Without these psychosocial cues. And to be honest, I mean, there is a paper they were forced to withdraw it. We're not sure why. They actually never said why they were forced to withdraw it. Just, you have to withdraw it, and never actually articulated the reasons for the withdrawal of the paper. And the paper showed fairly clearly that children with masks are breathing in high levels of CO2. And we know that this is going to have an impact on psychological or neurological development.
Not really a scientific note, but just kind of a thought that popped in my head. A job I had last summer, you had a choice. You could either wear like a mask, or they had these like helmets. It was like styrofoam, so it wouldn't press too hard on your head, and it's like the shield, right? It's this huge, and I was the only employee that ever wore the mask because I was just like, I just didn't want to wear that like space helmet. And I remember because I wear glasses, sometimes it would fog up when I'd exhale through. And I remember one time, like my coworker looking at me, going like, "You look like an idiot with your glasses fogging up," as they're looking at me with this like astronaut-sized helmet. That really had nothing to do with anything, but I just thought of it. To the back to the treatments, to me, it's just at like face value. It's just the most insane thing that people don't see the conflict of interest. Like if this is truly the thing that it is, if this is truly this, we're all in this together and we got to treat everyone and everyone's grandma's dying, you think that they would really be like, let's take World War II, right? I mean, we all know about the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Not a lot of people know about the incendiary bat plan, which was we were training a lot of bats. I don't know if you know about this. Bats go and hide in dark places, and Tokyo, and well, one of the cities, Tokyo. Well, no, we had firebombed it at that point. A lot of the cities in 1945 Japan, all the structures were wood, or the vast majority of them were wood, and they all had attics and crevices. And well, we had this genius idea to take bats and strap little like incendiary explosives to each one of them, just a tiny one, but we would release them out of the back of like cargo planes, like 100,000, and they were all going to go fly into all these nooks and crannies in Tokyo, and they were like timed bombs. So like 5 hours later, after they're all hibernating in their little dark spaces, it burns the city to the ground. And then the nuke worked, and we were like, all right, let's scrap the bat plan. Like the nuke's a little more effective. We just did it, worked great. I think the bat plan went terrible. They tried it in the desert, and they all flew to like some other place and accidentally burned down something else. The point is,
the bat.
Exactly. Well,
really?
Right? It's bat shit. But like, sorry, but like that's World War II, when these world powers are going at each other, total war. No punches held. I mean, truly ended with nuclear explosions. We were so hell bent on winning the war that we were banking on this A bomb. This was some sci-fi stuff. Take uranium and you implode it with a spherical lens and a level a city. What the hell? But in case it didn't work, we were also getting ready for a mainland invasion of Japan. We were doing the island hopping campaign, Okinawa, Guadalcanal, right? Brutal, Iwo Jima. And if that one didn't work, we had a third plan. We were going to use bats. The point is that's a total war where no matter number one punch, we're just going to go in there. And if we lose 1 million Marines, we'll do it. We're hoping this A bomb works. And if that doesn't work, we've got this crazy idea with bats. That's total war. No one went, no, I don't want to do, no, let's, the DOD said that the A bomb is safe and effective, and that there may be harmful side effects if we use the incendiary bats or mainland invasion. No one said that. They said we're going to do everything and let's hope for the best. With this, you think people will be going, this is the worst thing ever. This is 1918 all over again. Let's throw everything at it. And you're like, hell yeah, we've got warp speed. All right, let's try it. Let's use some new sci-fi technology. We also have ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. We think this could deleted. Wait, what is that guy saying? Ban him. Wait, why are you doing that? We're only using this. But this guy said this might work. Shouldn't we try this? Shut up. At a certain point, you start to go, is this really total war? Or is this a money grab?
Well, yeah. First of all,
weird analogy, I know, but
yeah. No, but I get it. If the FDA had recognized this early multi-drug therapy that has been championed by Dr. Zelenko, McCullough, Risch,
Fareed,
Tyson, Fareed, you name it. If they had recognized this, then the vaccines, in which the NIH has a heavy investment, would never have received emergency use authorization. the emergency use authorization can only be granted if you can demonstrate that there are no other viable treatment options for a particular disease. And so that led to their EUA. And of course, they made one of the worst mistakes ever is to vaccinate in the midst of a pandemic. That's when you drive variant formation, believe it or not, especially when the vaccine is such a narrow immune scope. And it's not the unvaccinated who are driving the mutations, unlike what you hear. It's these leaky vaccines, we call them. And it's known that leaky vaccines lead to these mutations. And so what, I mean, why otherwise, apart from the conflict of interest, I still don't understand what seems to be a growing mass obsession by our governments to get this vaccine or this injection into as many people as possible. And yet, we know now we're seeing the data coming out of Israel, which was one of the most vaccinated larger countries. It's not like Curacao or something like that. And they're suggesting the effectiveness of the vaccine now is 36%. So we know that the vaccine effectiveness is waning. But let's pretend that it wasn't waning. And that because, I would say that the powers that be are very loath to admit that the effectiveness of the vaccine is waning, because if that was the case, then why would they be thinking of boosters? Let's just forget that fact for a moment and say that it was a highly effective vaccine. If it is that highly effective, then why do vaccinated people get so, I guess, almost violent when faced with the notion that some people have chosen to not vaccinate? I mean, if you've vaccinated and you really, and you've been told this vaccine is both safe and effective, and it's neither, in comparison to any other vaccine in history, then why do you care if somebody doesn't vaccinate? And then when they say we're seeing a pandemic of the unvaccinated, which isn't quite true. There are some data that show, more vaccinated people are ending up in hospital than, more unvaccinated people are ending up in hospital than vaccinated people. But there are still 30% vaccinated people in the US, and I predict that as time goes on, we will see that number go up as the potency appears to wane. So why do I have to take it? Let's say if you're using it, do I have to take? I mean, if we're outside in the sun in Florida, and you put on sunblock, but I don't, do I have to put sunblock on for your sunblock to work? I mean, why? If it's an effective sunblock, why do I have to put on sunblock?
You can, and not only that, I mean, right, well, natural antibodies are stronger than any vaccine we can create. So if there was a way to conquer COVID, like in 3 days, like Joe Rogan, who granted is an insanely healthy and wealthy guy, but I mean, Dr. Fareed said with like 99.999% efficacy, he's treated 8,000 patients of all ages. Dr. McCullough cured his father using hydroxychloroquine, Q-certain, monoclonal antibodies. Wouldn't we be going for that, and you would get natural immunity, and you can you don't have to go to the no, get the vaccine, you Nazi. You're like, where did that come from?
When you hear arguments about the vaccine immunity being superior to naturally acquired immunity, if I had said something like that 3 years ago in the Department of Pathology, I would be laughed out of the building. I mean, we just know that's not the case. Natural immunity is far superior, just on basic biological principles alone. And now the data are coming out, and it's quite clear that if you've had COVID-19 clinically, or even subclinically, you didn't even know you had it, but it can be demonstrated with various testing approaches, you have a vanishingly small chance, about 0.008% chance of developing COVID. In other words, statistically zero. And maybe the initial sickness you had wasn't in fact COVID, who knows? And that's far better than vaccinal immunity. And the other issue that comes to mind is that, you know, antibodies, as important as they are not the only part of the immune system that plays a role in protecting us against disease. And new data have just come out showing, and one would expect exactly the same thing with vaccines, that when people make antibodies, even with natural infection, against the SARS-CoV-2, the antibodies that they make against the spike protein, surprisingly, seem to make disease worse. They seem to, they may actually facilitate even better the entry of of virus particles into your cells. So, but fortunately, if you've been infected naturally, you also have millions of other antibody proteins, or hundreds or thousands, that attack other parts of the virus, and they're quite safe. They're not self-harming viruses, and they're not going to induce, let's say, an autoimmune disease. But with the mRNA or DNA viruses that induce your body to produce the spike protein, the antibodies that are produced, first of all, very narrow. Many are protective, of course, but they certainly have a subset of antibodies that are not going to be protective and might well enhance the disease. And then if you put that together, so you take a leaky vaccine, a vaccine which is losing effectiveness, even if it was above 50%, which apparently it is not anymore in several jurisdictions, and you put that together with the known adverse events, and these are early stage adverse events. We have no idea what these vaccines will do 10 years from now or 15 years from now. When you put that together, you go, why am I taking a vaccine that really doesn't work very well, and exposing myself to potentially very severe reactions up to and including death, when natural infection works very well? I'm not saying we have COVID parties, but natural infection works very well. Most of the time, you don't even know you have COVID. So why would I risk getting this disease? And then there was a paper that came out recently that said, no, vaccinated patients are far less likely to end up in the hospital and so on, as opposed to unvaccinated. And what they forget about is that the vast majority of people who've had COVID-19 and, let's say, were unvaccinated, they didn't know it. So, they're looking at hospitalized patients, and they say, oh, look at that. The vaccinated people are doing better than the unvaxxed. Well, wait a second. There are millions of people out there who are not vaccinated who got COVID. We know on the basis of work done by Steve Pellick that probably 90% not probably, 90% of the study population he looked at using an antibody test, but not just against spike protein, it tested many of the antigenic epitopes that we talk about. And he found about 90% of those people had had COVID already, and they didn't know it. So really, the number of people who've had COVID and either didn't know it, or maybe they had a cold, or felt like they had a cold, is in the millions. And that's what you should be dividing your number of patients against. And then you start to see, oh, wait a minute. Vaccination or unvaccinated people really aren't at very great risk at all. And if they do get sick because of morbidities, or perhaps they don't have comorbidities and they just happen to be unlucky and they get sick, like Joe Rogan, we have early multi-drug interventional treatment, which is so effective. I mean, the effectiveness of that, it rivals the initial effectiveness reported by the vaccine companies. And again, let me emphasize, reported by the vaccine
Reported,
companies.
yeah.
They've left out a lot of data. We believe they haven't included many adverse events for various reasons. There are anecdotal stories about that from patients. And, how the FDA can just rely solely on experimentation done by the very company that stands to make billions of dollars
That's selling it
from a successful trial. How do you trust that? It's sort of a little bit reminiscent of what happened with the FDA and the Boeing 737 MAX, which is that the FDA decided that Boeing could be trusted, and I always thought Boeing was a great company, but Boeing could be trusted to follow all the safety protocols and monitor and so on and so forth, and therefore the FDA didn't have to be as intrusive. Well, look what happened with the 737 MAX.
Two went down, right? Yeah.
Two went down, and it turns out there were some very serious engineering problems with that aircraft, but it was being monitored by Boeing. But if the FDA had been involved as it should have been under ordinary circumstances that we used to see 20 years ago, I don't think these problems would have surfaced. They would have fixed them.
And again, this is not really a scientific statement, and I've kept you for about 45 minutes, so I'll wrap this up in a minute. But it's like flu cases went down to like 0 in like the last year and a half.
Yeah.
People are like, well, that's because we were all socially distancing and practicing great hygiene. Well, why did COVID spread?
Right.
And
exactly.
then okay, let's play devil's advocate, and then they hit you with, well, there's a 14-day like dormant period where you're asymptomatic but you're spreading COVID. All right, but doesn't the vaccine make you asymptomatic or make your symptoms less worse allegedly, but you're still spreading it, you can still get it? So the very reason we shut down is what's happening
it's called
now.
having your cake and eating it too.
Circle. It's just this.
You only have asymptomatic spread if you're asymptomatic because you had the COVID vaccine. And the other issue is that asymptomatic spread, although there is some degree of asymptomatic spread, at least in my opinion, a lot of people don't even agree with that. There is some evidence for asymptomatic spread, but overall, the asymptomatic spread absolutely doesn't drive the pandemic. And I can point you to my favorite study done in Wuhan, actually, where they followed, I don't know, over 1 million people. And I guess you could do that in China. And they followed these people who were infected and so on, and looked at their interpersonal interactions with others. And they could not identify a single case where asymptomatic transmission occurred. That's a pretty big study. Not one case. It comes out of Wuhan. I don't think it was the Wuhan Institute of Virology that did it, but a university. And I'm terrible with the author names, but there is such a study which has been published, peer-reviewed and published, and looking at well over 1 million, maybe millions, but certainly well over 1 million people. If they were asymptomatic and demonstrably so, they didn't spread the disease. Period.
It's gonna be insane what books come out in 10 and 20 years about all of this, about the collusion. I mean, if it is so clear that there is blatant collusion between the FDA, big tech companies, and the profit margins of big pharma. I mean, it's comically.
There is, but there's also something that's inexplicable. Well, it's only inexplicable insofar as I refuse to believe why it's happening, and therefore I say it's inexplicable. But that is the medical profession's capitulation to the current narrative that there is no treatment aside from remdesivir, which doesn't really work very well, if at all. Only one study showed that maybe it actually reduced mortality. The only other studies have shown it either doesn't work, is toxic, or might reduce hospital stay by 2 days. And so, these people, it's as if they have become lobotomized or otherwise afraid to challenge the narrative. And so we're faced with people who seriously believe that that they're right. Now, I had a conversation with a few people the other day, one of whom was a mentor of mine, very bright man, and he disagrees with me about the need for the vaccine, which is fine. You know, fortunately, he and I are able to have scientific discussions that don't devolve into name calling, which is, as you know, usually what happens these days. And so I said, well, you know, what about the data that and I would talk about Van den Bosch, Tyson, or Harvey Risch, who's done some of the seminal literature analyses showing that, for example, hydroxychloroquine is highly effective, or Steve Pellick's work on antibody immune status in people in Vancouver. I said, have you heard of these guys? Do you know of their research, which I described? And no, he said, no, I don't. Who are those people? And so I thought to myself, well, if he doesn't know who those people are, then just who is he listening to? Because it's not the people who are deeply involved in the actual research and the actual science. And what came to mind to me, it would be sort of like you and I, let's say we were physicists and we were talking about relativity. And then I say, so are you familiar with the paper done by Albert Einstein? And you go, who? Who's Albert Einstein? I think I would know immediately that you're not quite getting your information from the right sources.
I remember when I had on Dr. Robert Malone, episode 495. I posted that on Facebook. And like an idiot, for all of social media, blanket across, I have like one strict policy with myself, even before I started the podcast, is I post stuff and then I delete the app. And when I want to post something and I download, just so I don't end up on it and, you know, just scrolling myself into oblivion. And also when I get notifications, I click on whatever bell or whatever the app is, and I click on it and I look away from my screen and refresh it. So they all go away.
Yeah.
I don't look intentionally. So when people say, well, I comment, I'll be like, oh, dude, I truly, I mean, you could comment on it and say, Tommy, I just found a check for $1 million with your name. I don't know. I just don't because I just don't care. It's for my own mental health, whether it's people that agree with me or disagree with me. To me, I'm like, I can't, it's quicksand. I got to stay away. Well, like a moron, I decided to just check out the comments like a week later on the Dr. Malone. And people were saying, what does this guy know about the vaccine? And I said, well, I said he invented or was assisted in the invention of the mRNA technology. And one other response was, just because he invented it doesn't mean he's an expert on it. And I was like, okay, all right, you know, I'll try to exercise with this. So like 5 days later, I interviewed Dr. Peter McCullough, and we talked about myocarditis. And someone commented, this guy isn't a virologist. He's not an epidemiologist. I said, no, he's the most published cardiorenal physician in world history. I said, what does that have to do with COVID?
Well, COVID is a cardiovascular,
is a respiratory. And I said, and well, specifically, the video is about myocarditis in young, relatively young, myself, males.
Yeah.
And they said, what gives him the authority to speak on this?
Well, that's
someone said this guy's just like a heart doctor. It's not like he invented the vaccine. And I said, no, he did not. But let me point you to the episode 5 days ago where I did have, it's just this eye shut, ear shut. And at a certain point you go, oh, you know what? You're right. Screw it. You're right. Go get 12 boosters.
Yeah.
Sorry for disagreeing.
Yeah. So this is the level of disagreement you get. I mean, do you really think that Bob Malone doesn't understand the technology that he invented? It's completely absurd. And but that's the level of criticism that you get. They won't necessarily throw data at you.
No.
or suggest. I mean, I maybe I have to admit I didn't give you the names of the papers that I've read, but they are there. You could search them online just by putting in the relevant topic that I talked about, and you could find them. And the data don't lie, and they're consistent. And yet people will then come up with these silly ad hominem comments. Well, I mean, he's a cardiologist. What would he know about myocarditis? And I want to tell you something. I happen to know somebody very high up in what's called the Ottawa Heart Institute. It's one of Canada's, one of North America's preeminent heart research and treatment programs. And right now, he is dealing with approximately 100 patients who have vaccine-induced myocarditis or other vascular diseases. And the very sad part is we don't really know how to treat those problems yet. COVID turns out to be relatively easy to treat, but the vaccine-induced disease, he's got several in the ICU on ventilators now. And myocarditis, as you learned from Dr. Hodgkinson, I mean, it is not a mild disease. And when I was discussing this with this individual, I mean, again, I could talk about this with, let's say, the head of ophthalmology here. That doesn't necessarily mean he knows that much about COVID. But if I'm talking to somebody who is very, very, very high up in the Ottawa Heart Institute, who's telling me about the problems they're seeing and that they're being flooded with patients who have vaccine-induced disease, and in his case, myocarditis in the main, that has to tell you something. And yet, what are they going to say? Well, he's just a cardiologist, top cardiology researcher in the country, if not North America. Peter McCullough knows him very well, by the way.
I mean, I don't know anyone. I haven't had the vaccine. Almost everyone I know has. I don't know anyone who hasn't had the vaccine who cares if someone else gets the vaccine or wishes anything ill on them. You look at the VAERS data, it's horrific, right? There's 1,700 miscarriages, 13,627 deaths, 17,000 permanently disabled.
Yeah.
And then you see when people are unvaxxed and it's, I hope you die a slow death on a ventilator. And it's like, is this really about compassion? Is this really what this is about?
No, it's the evolution of societal norms. I say that our society, the fabric of society, has been hopefully not irreparably damaged, but it has been damaged by these draconian lockdowns, school closures, mask wearing, insistence on everyone getting a vaccine, whether it's indicated medically or not. It's, yeah, I guess I could explain it, but as I said to you before, my soul doesn't like the explanation,
doesn't like the implications
that I'm coming up with, and therefore I still say that most of it, this activity is just inexplicable.
It's like Hitler wasn't the worst murderer in history, but there's always something about Nazi Germany that sticks out to people because you expect it from like a medieval warlord, you expect it from like a third world nation. But when you look at like Germany, like post World War I Germany, or even pre World War I, you look at the physicists from there, you look at the culture, right? And it's just like, it seemed like the pinnacle.
Absolutely.
And then when they go about, exterminating people, there's something eerie about, right? It's one thing when it's the crazy homeless guy that kills someone. It's another thing when it's the well-rounded dad.
The pinnacle of modern 20th century society.
Yeah.
Just literally collapsed into a black hole of evil, really.
And you wonder how
it can happen anywhere. I think it's also worth noting before we sign off that Denmark has just tossed vaccination passports and the like. They're using the argument that, oh, well, we've reached herd immunity, so we don't need it now. And I think they're doing that because they don't want to admit that what they did was wrong. But at the very least, they have tossed out these draconian regulations, which aren't laws, actually, they're just regulations. And it's also noteworthy that the High Court, the Supreme Court in Spain, several months ago, declared that the PCR test that was used is completely unreliable and cannot be used to confirm diagnosis of COVID. And that same Supreme Court, just days ago, I think, has completely ruled as unconstitutional all these other non-pharmacological interventions, and in particular, like masking, locking down. But they ruled against forced vaccination and vaccine passports.
So it seems like maybe the tide's turning, but
it does. But every time I think it's turning, something worse happens. For example, the Premier of Ontario was dead set, sort of like a governor in the States. So he was dead set against the vaccine passport. In fact, his chief medical advisor was saying that there were really no scientific grounds to introduce a vaccine passport. Well, we're getting a vaccine passport in our province by, I guess, the end of the month or something like that, and meaning that unvaccinated, unclean Untermenschen will not be able to enter a restaurant, any non-essential public facility, and it kind of makes me wonder what's non-essential. You bet you'll be allowed to go to the liquor store. Because during the lockdowns, the liquor stores were considered an essential service and not locked down. So you'll probably still, without a vax passport, get into a liquor store, but you won't be able to get into certain hospitals, which is a complete denial of treatment. People are going to lose their jobs over this at a time when there's nursing shortages and they're threatening to fire nurses who aren't vaccinated. What are they? It's utter madness.
And then 1933 Germany doesn't look so. You go, oh.
We have to stop wagging our fingers at the average Berliner.
And you go, oh, that's how it. Okay.
That's how it happens. I mean, I literally I literally thought I was watching a movie, like one of these dystopian movies, when I was told by our administration that because of directive number 6, we all have to report our vaccination status and or get vaccinated. Directive 6.
Directive 6.
Send chills up and down your spine. Nothing will.
Replace unvaccinated with Uden.
Yeah.
And enjoy a real-time history lesson.
Yeah.
Nothing else. Don't change anything else.
So, I mean, when I saw the wording on an email sent to me telling me that I had to declare one way or the other whether I was vaccinated, and they're referring to Directive 6, I responded saying, I think I remember seeing this in 1984, the movie, and
insane.
It's that bad. So that's why you think there's cracks in the dike, the dam is breaking. Any other metaphors I can use? But you see this, you see hope, a ray of hope in Spain and Denmark. But then, like in Ontario, where our premier was absolutely adamant about and dead set against instituting vaccine passports. Well, guess what? Coming to an Ontario citizen near you is the Vax passport. There you go.
Why does anyone need to own a gun?
Yeah.
Government's not coming after you, conspiracy theorists. 18 months later.
Was it Reagan who said, I'm the most scary?
Scariest 9 words.
Government, and I'm here to help you.
Hey, man, it's well, we can do what we are doing and we can talk about it. And that's how you continue to needle through. They're not giving up. Well, neither should we.
Correct.
We're going to
That's
keep
all
doing
we can
this.
do at the moment. Mainstream media are not interested, apart from, let's say, Laura Ingraham and maybe Tucker Carlson. And even then, the wrong messaging gets out because they don't fully understand the actual scientific data or pathophysiology of what we're talking about. But at least they're getting the message out, or mostly appropriate message out. But otherwise, no. And so the only way to do this is, I guess, podcasts like yours and other online news sites, or whatever you want to call them, alternate news sites. So what you're doing a good job. I mean, it's important. It's probably the most important thing you have ever done in your life.
Yeah, and I love it. I love talking about it. I love doing it. I love to me, there's nothing more fun than, above all else, above the fact that I think it's like the moral thing to do and the right thing to do. There will never be anything more fun in life than just doing what you're not supposed to do. You just don't do that. You want to do it. It's at the very, like the interior child. Just don't do that. It's the cat. Don't knock it off the table.
You're gonna do it.
Tommy, don't talk about the vaccine. I would never have reached out to any of these physicians if it wasn't banned on YouTube. It was the second I started getting like emails about not doing it when I was like, I need to find Dr. Malone. I need to find Dr. McCullough. If they just didn't ban it, I would have zero interest in this. I am truly at my core. I'm the cat just pushing the plate off the table. Just don't do it. Stop banning it, and I'll stop having on physicians tomorrow because I'll lose interest.
That's right.
That's the case. But I've kept you for 20 minutes longer than I said I would, and because like a normal person, I watch a lot of old atomic tests on YouTube. They restore them and upscale them with 4K AI. And I'm just looking at your background, and I just keep waiting for like an A-bomb to go off, because this is the same like foreground of every video from the 40s of a nuke going off. So I hope that doesn't happen, but tide hasn't come up, and Dr. Tenenbaum's still alive. So
yeah, my ankles are getting a bit wet here because it is coming up, the tide.
If I'm gonna reach,
I don't know if you can see behind me.
I'm gonna reach through this screen and smack you.
I know. I'm sorry. I can't help myself. It's a sickness.
Hey, it's sometimes they got to come out. Dr. Tenenbaum, thank you so much. I'll email you and we'll set up our next one, and keep doing what you're doing. I'll keep doing what I'm doing. And if you know any interesting people that would come on my podcast, specifically physicians talking about COVID, please send them my way, and I will continue to do what I do and interview them.
Okay. I will do that.
Thank you so much.
In mind already.
Please do send them along.
Okay.
All right. God bless. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time, and do the right thing, everybody.
Yeah.